Welcome to the OddsFitness Podcast, where science, performance, and longevity come together. Today, we are bringing you a powerful conversation between two leaders shaping modern fitness. Our guest, Kris Gethin, is a globally recognized transformation expert and creator of the dramatic training principle. With a background in sports therapy and decades of elite coaching, he has influenced millions and redefined physique transformation worldwide. Joining him is Mr. Asad Hussain, founder and CEO of Odds Fitness. As an exercise and sports scientist, he's a pioneer in quantified health and performance in India, bridging physiology, psychology, and lifestyle to elevate long term health and movement quality. This episode blends global transformation principles with data driven performance and longevity. So let's go.
So, Chris, is this where you work? Do you use the treadmill usually when you're working? This is more like a work treadmill, I'm assuming. I see a lot of people doing that these days.
Yeah, I've got my desk is a treadmill, so I've got a treadmill desk. I work from home, so I've got to move, otherwise I'll be stuck on my ass all day.
Great. I remember you from bodybuilding.com days. You
Oh
would,
yeah, God, that's going back 2008 to 2012. That was.
yeah. And I would always go up on it, research, look at the articles, refer to them. That's where I sort of began from. It was you and it was Kaizad Kapadia, who I would always refer to as my bodybuilding guide back in the day.
Got it. Yeah. I know. I remember Kazad, obviously. Rest in peace. But yeah, he was definitely spearheading like the academies and the training there back in the day. And India. Bodybuilding.com was definitely like spearheading back then because there was no Amazon, there was no big gorilla in the room, then there wasn't any social media. The only thing that was out was like Facebook and, MySpace before that. And then they had the Facebook for fitness enthusiasts, which was Body Space. I don't know if you use Body Space at all.
No, just bodybuilding.com. And I had this book called the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. It was by Arnold, I think. So
Yes, that's right.
so just three people who I would follow: him, you, and Kaizad. And somewhere or the other, Kaizad was one of those individuals who I always looked up to in terms of leadership and how he would always address an audience and speak to individuals in that regard and inspire trainers to take up this as a profession. Of course,
Yeah,
you were
100%.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that was the unfortunate thing, I guess, in India, wasn't it? It wasn't really regarded as a profession. The clients would tell the trainers what to do, which was kind of bizarre, and they weren't holding themselves to self-esteem, which Kazar did a very, very good job of that.
yeah, when it comes to bodybuilding, it wasn't as though people were following certain professions like you had Ronnie Coleman, who did he was a police officer, or somebody else who was a firefighter, and then also bodybuilding was part of that. In India, bodybuilding was a full-time thing, so you're essentially not doing anything else, training a couple of people and looking for sponsorships. And India came out of poverty not very long ago, because they had partition and everything. So because they were dealing with those situations, bodybuilding was automatically taken up by individuals who weren't professionally very sound, and that's the place where they found home and where they found that they were the strongest, and it was picked up by a group of individuals who weren't very educated, sadly. So it automatically
Right.
became that profession. Now
Got it.
it's changed. It's
Yeah.
gotten much better now.
Yeah, I've seen so many people actually jump from one profession now and become a personal trainer. Maybe they went through a transformation with another trainer themselves and decided that they loved it so much that they just wanted to share. And this was content that they're able to retain now because they enjoyed it and it gave them a purpose. So I've seen that several times. As one of my clients, he was from the financial sector. He's in Hyderabad. And he has since become a personal trainer, and his client base all come from LinkedIn. He just promotes on LinkedIn to, basically his demographic coming from the financial world, and he's doing very, very well from that. So it's really awesome to see people transition now.
Right. And people are willing to pay now. Earlier they would not look at health or a fit body as something where they would want to put their money in, at least in India. And now you see people are willing to go the extra mile. Some people in Gurgaon, where your gym is, I think they were willing to share like half their salary for being fit. And I think that started back in 2015 when bodybuilding really, like with Sheru and all these guys coming up, and bodybuilding just went upwards, So I think that the influence comes from that.
It comes from that, and I found that it definitely came from Bollywood as well. Much like what happened in the US in like the 80s, when you had your Van Dams and your Stallones and Schwarzeneggers and all these action heroes. And then you kind of saw that at the beginning of like 2009, 2010 in Bollywood. And now, those are the movies that were doing very well. And then people kind of aspired to be like these Bollywood stars. So the gym started getting a little busier as well, which is phenomenal. At the end of the day, if they're going to look up to somebody like an actor, like this outer world experienced person that doesn't even exist, and they have that opportunity to be this quote unquote superhero, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's really, really good, because not everyone is going to relate to me or relate to Kazad or relate to a trainer or, any like a oiled up bodybuilder on stage, but they'll generally relate to that action hero in that movie. They want to, they're pushing for that guy and they want to be that guy themselves. So I think that's very, very influential, especially knowing how big Bollywood is there in India, the impact that it has on people's emotion, and people can attach themselves to that.
That's so true. So coming to that, you've coached Hrithik Roshan, Ranveer Singh, John Abraham. I was reading on the internet. So how was your experience training, let's say, these Bollywood stars versus, let's say, like you said, your client from Hyderabad?
Yeah, everybody's different, much like every Bollywood star is different, much like every individual is different. And, it can be very taxing. It can be very trying, because when somebody actually starts, they usually employ my services when they have a movie script and they know that role requires them to be in shape, whether that be for the stunts or from aesthetic purposes. But when you start filming, you can't stop. That's the tough bit.
Right.
Or, if they're in a position where they can, yes, but it's only momentarily. So, for instance, I trained Vicky Kaushal last year. He got injured on set because he had to be chained up for, I don't know, it's like 4 nights in a row during nighttime shoots. And during that time, he got an impingement in his shoulder, down his arm, could not use his left arm, I think it was. And, but, we managed to stop shooting only for like a week, or that particular scene for a week. But now, basically the movie was delayed a little bit, but it's like you can't stop. You'd really like to say, okay, let's get this worked on, let's go see some specialists, blah, 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 because we need to ensure that we continue to get in shape for these topless scenes that are coming. You don't have that privilege, unfortunately. When the movie is started, it's very difficult to stop. So, where you can kind of take people out of their normal regime, usually when it comes from doing a movie, you usually can't. There's no breaks in that schedule. And unfortunately, the sleep can be all over the place, because they'll film for 6 weeks straight. There's no days off. It's very strenuous. They're long days, and sometimes they're nights. So it messes with their circadian rhythm. So it's very taxing on the person, the client involved. For me, of course, I can navigate these things, but it can be very, very stressful. And as we know, cortisol is a hormone that's not very good when it comes to insulin sensitivity or for muscle building. It can be very catabolic. So you're doing whatever you possibly can to keep that person in a parasympathetic state the entire time, which can be very trying.
It would be, because if I don't get my 8 hours of sleep, I'm struggling with my heart rate variability, my resting heart rates all over the place. And I think there's a lot of stress in general when you look at these metropolitan cities, especially in India, because I travel a lot, especially in Europe, everything shuts down. People unwind, everything's shut down, and there's no like usually during the week people would like to go home and sleep. But somehow, the culture here in Delhi has become, let's go out somewhere on a weekday as well as on the weekends, both weekends. And Monday has somehow become the new, let's say, Sunday, so to speak. And we look at blood reports, we look at blood biopsies all the time, and we see elevated cortisol levels. We see insulin resistance in a lot of individuals. And of course, India being the diabetic capital of the world, it doesn't help. So how can someone navigate a situation like that when they're dealing with stress? Because that's interesting what you said, like, you've got like 6 weeks of back to back shooting, stressful. How does one manage their cortisol and get into a parasympathetic state, so to speak?
Yeah, so there's several things that's going to be involved there, making sure that they're not on their device unless they need to be. This is a drug at the end of the day that is stimulating, dopamine, adrenaline, or epinephrine, and, they need to be releasing a little bit more oxytocin, serotonin when they're sleeping, melatonin, and they don't have that opportunity if they're always stimulated. And the chances are on set, they're going to be stimulated anyway. They're going to be interacting. They're going to be reading their lines. They're going to be focused on delivering their scripts. And then there's action usually involved in that as well. So they're very, very stressful days. So making sure that you're staying away from the device as much as possible. When they do go into the trailer, try to spend some time in there alone. Don't have me in there. Don't have your makeup people in there. Just have yourself without your phone. Do some deep breath work. I'll usually get them to earth, ground, take their shoes and socks off. I know it sounds a little bit hippie, but that, usually on the set, there's a lot of people on their phone, there's non-native EMFs, there's Wi-Fi, and they're getting penetrated the entire time. So I try to get them to take their shoes and socks off, or I get all of my Bollywood clients wear, and I'm not sponsored by these guys, a company called Bahe, B-A-H-E, trainers, which they're earthing, grounding trainers. One of the owners is actually from India. They're based in the UK. So I'll get all of them to wear that. So they have that connection with the earth as well. So those EMFs are penetrating through them and not necessarily into them. And they're usually consuming foods that are very easy to digest, so high BV at those particular times. Because if they're in a rest and digest state, yeah, I don't mind them having heavier proteins. But if they're not, if they're more in a sympathetic, fight or flight state, then I want them foods to be very, very easy to digest, not to stress them anymore. And of course, unless they're on, being filmed, but they're around a lot of harsh artificial light, particularly in their trailers, because the light is low, then I'm getting them to wear, blue light blocking glasses throughout the day, the yellow lens or clear lens if they have to see colors, or like the red lens for a good hour or two before bed. And I'll always bookend their days. So they do not use their phone or their device an hour before bed or an hour after waking, and make sure it's definitely not on charge around them. So there's certain things, and obviously looking at the metrics that you mentioned before, looking at their sleep data, ensuring that their HRV is at good levels and not overstressing themselves. And then I'm not overtraining them as well, because it's very easy for us to go, okay, we're being used to doing 5 days a week weight training and maybe 6 days a week cardio. Now we should probably bring that volume and intensity down a little bit while we're trying to go through different circadian patterns, different time zones, different schedules that could be 15, 16-hour days. So we have to change and manipulate accordingly and, make sure that they do recover.
Right. What about sleep? Like, what would your sleep strategy be? Do they do more naps in the middle? There was this one strategy of sleep. I think it was poly something, where they would go into like small brief naps throughout the day to make up for the lack of sleep. Would that be a strategy?
Yes, and this is where my biohacks usually come in as well, because if they have gone from, like a very sympathetic dominant state, so they're trying to remember their lines, blah, blah, blah. Now I need to ensure that they switch off completely within that 30, 45-minute time window that they've got. So usually, I make sure that they've always got like eye mask with them so they can block out all light, that they have noise canceling headphones or earplugs to cut out all noise as well. And I will usually have them wear like an Athena, something called an Athena. Choose Muse used to do, they do this, but it comes from the same company, Muse, or something like a brain tap. Basically, it's a guided meditation, because you can generally get into guided meditation a lot quicker than saying, hey, go in your trailer and just shut your mind off. That's probably going to take them 30 minutes just to shut off the monkey mind in their brain. So if I have a guided meditation, let's say there's a brain tap and it uses light therapy through the retina into the ear canal, uses sound therapy, guided meditation, binaural beats, then usually they'll get into that meditative state much quicker and obviously go into sleep much quicker. And if they do have access to like a hydrogen machine, then I'll have them to breathe hydrogen at that time, because that can usually be very calming, but it can be very clearing for the brain. So when they do come out of sleep, they're alert, they're straight on it. So those are some of the strategies that I'll generally implement.
That's interesting. There are a lot of these things which we do at Odds as well, because, we introduced the hydrogen, we put it up there in an upcoming studio that we have. We do the HRV with a device called the HeartMath, the device that they put on the ear. And of course, we have these trackable devices, these wearable devices, sorry. So speaking of which, how good do you think these devices are in terms of the data that they give us to use? Is it generally very accurate, like the Whoop or the iWatch? Should one use it as a broad measure and estimate of things, or are they pretty accurate in the way they estimate the various?
I think you should use it as a broad stroke, to be honest with you. Like I've worn the Ultrahuman, the Gabbit, the Whoop, obviously the Aura. I've worn them all, and they'll all be different to each other to a certain degree. Right. So I think what matters is that you just use the same one, and you use that every night. As you progress, you can see if your sleep is getting better or worse. Much like if you've got a weighing scales and it's inaccurate. I don't care if it's inaccurate. Just use the same scales every week. Because if you use multiple scales, then you're going to get multiple readings. So I'd say that you find that form of quantification and you kind of stick with it and use that over the course of time to see if you're improving, flatlining, plateauing, or getting better. I'll use, for instance, like for biological age, I'll use glycan age. Now, some people would argue that the Horvath clock is better, or methylation is better, or telomeres is a better way to measure. Now, I don't care how you measure it. Again, just use the same measurement every single year as you're recording your biological age to see if you're actually reversing or accelerating. And I'd say that, that's the way that I would utilize it, but I don't overcomplicate it. So sometimes I'll have a client wear a CGM, but they don't need to wear a CGM for the rest of their life. Let's use it for like several months, document how you react under different situations, under different sleep cycles with different foods. And then once we've got that data, there's probably no need to do it again, at least for a year or so.
Right. Makes sense. I did that with the Whoop and just got like structure to my routine. And after that, I just didn't wear it because sometimes it would just like make me anxious to look up in the morning.
That's the thing, you can become over anxious with these things, because I used to do the same thing. I'd wake up early in the morning. I'm like, okay, I got to get my cardio in, my sauna, my ice bath, my red lights, got to get on my PEMF, got to meditate, and you'd get stressed over these things. Yeah. And now you're not in that the parasympathetic dominant states as you should be. So you're kind of going against, you're contradicting what you're trying to attain. So I think you have to be a little bit instinctive every now and again. Look, if there's a week that you don't feel like taking supplements for some reason, hey, maybe just take a week off and then get back onto it, where it has to be a little bit instinctive. You can be very regimented, much like you go to the gym and you look thinking, okay, I've got to hit these free weights, I've got to hit these exercises, maybe hit a personal best if possible. But if you're not feeling it that day, then maybe you're going to do machines and high reps and cables and increase the intensity by shortening the rest periods so you stay injury free. So you have to, as you learn and become a little bit more mature within and knowing yourself and being finely tuned, you have to use instinctive to adapt to certain environmental factors.
Right. Correct. Also, Kris, how would you, let's say, do you think there's a trade-off with longevity when you're bodybuilding? And also the same question is extended to if you're doing maximal performance, is there a trade-off with longevity there?
Yeah, so there is, you have to balance this out to a certain degree. Of course, I still train like a bodybuilder to a certain degree, but I'm not like an IFBB pro. I'm not taking steroids. I'm not going to be like 240 pounds at 5'8", but I'll walk around at about 205 pounds at 5'8". So I'm a little bit bigger, low body fat than the average person. But I'll always move, like I'm, on a treadmill desk right now. I love going for runs. I love going for cycle rides. I like going swimming. But I'm just not going to push it to those extremes. So if I'm going to push running to extreme, I notice, or any endurance, I notice that my testosterone starts to tank. If I'm going to push myself to the extreme in the gym and cut back my cardio, then my organs, like, such as my heart and lungs, they're going to decrease. My VO2 max is going to lessen. And we know all of these things in balance are direct correlators to longevity, whether it be your squat strength, grip strength, your bone density, your muscle, your flexibility in your metabolic flexibility, your blood sugar stability, and obviously having your VO2 max, heart and lung capacity, getting synovial fluid to your joints, having plenty of mobility and core strength. All of these are direct correlators to our longevity. If you push one over the edge too much, then of course it becomes a detractor. And now you're not good. Like when I started doing Ironman training back in 2017, in the beginning, I noticed my heart rate variability was tanking. My cortisol levels were increasing. My testosterone was decreasing. And I just wasn't able to sleep as well. So I was overtraining, obviously. But I wanted to participate in all of these things, and I still do. So I have to balance it and maybe do more sprints, shorter intervals, not spend so much time there, bring the frequency of my weight training down, maybe the volume of my reps down or volume of my sets, and find that balance through the quantification and then kind of know where you're at. But a lot of it does come from, I find, from managing your stress and focusing on sleep. Those are the two things that, you could ask me about all the biohacks that I've done, whether it be stem cells or whatever it is. The best biohack is sleep for me and for a lot of my clients. But, what is the things that we usually focus on? Well, it's not the free stuff. We have to be able to purchase our health, right? And that's why you go to these biohacking events and people have an extortionate amount of money to spend, but you ask them to work out and the application isn't there. If I go to the host hotel for like the World Biohack Congress in Dubai, chances are the gym is pretty quiet in the morning. But if I go to a fitness event, that gym is packed. But the people at the biohacking event think that they can purchase their health, where the people at the fitness events generally need to focus a little bit more on the biohacks to give them more longevity in their sport, in their career, in whatever they're trying to achieve. So I think what we need to do is kind of meet in the middle.
Right. And what would your comment be on somebody like who's doing all of this? And, because we get to hear this a lot, he did everything and, he was fit, he exercised for longevity, but still, in India, you've got a lot of sudden deaths. You've got a lot of heart attacks at an unusual age, which is under 40, under 30 in some cases. And those are fit individuals who sometimes happen to have such poor outcomes. And then people maybe, refer to that and say, okay, you know what, that guy did everything, he died. But the other one, she used to drink 2 glasses of whiskey every day, be high on nicotine, but still she lived up to 95. So, how would you speak to a client like that?
Yeah. So, all these sudden deaths are not just happening in India, they're happening all around the world. We're seeing it in Brazil, we're seeing it in Europe, we're seeing it here in the US, Canada, everywhere. But whatever sport or pastime that you happen to be involved in, you're going to see it there more. So if you follow the gym culture and the people that you follow are influencers who work out, you're going to see it more there. But it's happening in equestrian, it's happening in football, soccer, American football, rugby, running. We're seeing it everywhere. Now, I'm not going to go into the weeds on this, but we know what happened over like 5 years ago. The world changed and things happened because of it. But I'm not going to go into that. But all I can say is it doesn't matter what you look like from the outside. You can have a six-pack. You can have low body fat percentages. But if you're consuming a lot of sugar, a lot of refined, rancid vegetable oils, if you're consuming bleached carbohydrates that have no minerals or they've been stripped of their fiber, you're constantly spiking your blood glucose levels. It doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. That engine on the inside is just not being lubricated or maintained to perform correctly. So you need to make sure that you're fueling yourself with the right things, because you could say, hey, that person is doing everything, but maybe they did something 4 or 5 years ago that we're not aware of, or maybe they have a genetic fault that put an early end to their life, because we see that as well.
Yeah.
But then you'll have famous people like your Ozzy Osbournes of the world that consumed an ungodly amount of alcohol and did drugs and whatnot. But it doesn't mean that that is going to be you or your disposition. Just like everybody has a different sector of time given on this earth, we all have different character traits. We all have different personalities. We all have a time that we're going to leave this earth as well. That's going to be different to someone else. We can't compare each other. Can to ensure that the decisions that we make when it comes to food is going to heal our future, whether that be tomorrow or 20 years from now, and not harm it. And a lot of people, even when they look great, they're consuming supplements that have loads of artificial sweeteners, and then they're consuming sugars because they're being very, very active. And they're just, they're dumpster fire of inflammation. And as we know, inflammation, we call inflammaging now, just causes a lot of reactive oxygen species, a lot of stress, and a lot of heart attacks.
That's true. A lot of these guys who I've heard of, famous people, I'm not going to name them, underslept, chronically under stress, and of course, if while being in a situation like that, you're going to push your body to perform. Of course, you're going to flatline on a treadmill or something like that. At some point, there's going to be a break point.
Of course. And like you said, especially in India, where people just do not sleep, they go to bed so late. When I'm there, the amount of social gatherings that I turn down or meetings is unbelievable, because people message me and say, hey, let's meet up at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening. I go to bed at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the evening. I'm not going to have a meeting then, but hey, I'll meet you at 6 a.m. after I've done my cardio and after I've done my meditation in the morning, and we can go for breakfast or a coffee if there's anywhere open. But, I think people have definitely the wrong idea of what their true circadian setting is, because our ancestors didn't have artificial light or caffeine or coffee shops or restaurants to go visit in the evening. And that is stimulating this, this artificial blue light penetrating our retina to keep us stimulated, keep us awake. They didn't have that. When the candlelight went out just after dusk, they'd go to bed. Now that doesn't happen anymore. And now we live in a world where it's, the entrepreneurship spirit, the Gary V's of the world to say you can't sleep, or sleeping's for wimps. You've got to get your work done. You've got to pursue your life's passion. And if that means sacrificing your sleep, so be it. That's the worst thing that you can do for your longevity and your heart health.
Or even for performance, like, your cognitive performance, so to speak. And we have a lot of clients who are high performers. They have the same, they resonate with the grind culture, so to speak. And my only message to them is that, if you get to do whatever you're doing in 12 hours, in exactly 4 hours of deep work, because if you really sit down, you're well slept, you've got your focus in, and you don't have too many distractions, you're not reactive, I think you can get a lot of work done within a couple of hours, where you're just being disturbed by random different things and agitated, being in a sympathetic state and not having the right sort of faculties to focus on what truly matters.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, we get used to it, right? If we have McDonald's every day for 2 weeks, then on that second week, we don't feel bad. It's our norm. We don't know what sluggish means, so this must be our new norm. And it's the same thing without sleep. People are trying to think of a word, they're umming and ahhing, they have that brain fog. That's their norm. They don't know what is the possibility because they haven't had a good night's sleep. So people quickly reach to nootropics. They want their functional mushrooms. Now they're going towards all the peptides like the dihexa, the J147. What nootropics can I have to enhance my brain? You mentioned the nicotine before, which is all okay to a certain degree if you've already optimized yourself from a sleep structure, from a hormonal structure, from a health structure. If you've optimized everything and you now need to want to continue to take brain drugs, then okay, fine. But don't take those, and don't take your melatonin and all that sort of stuff if you haven't focused on that structure and giving your brain the nutrients and the oxygen and the hydration that it needs in order for it to function.
Right, absolutely true. So speaking of cognitive function, how would you strategize a cognitive enhancement strategy for a regular person, or let's say an entrepreneur?
Okay. Well, the first thing is focus on things that's going to be productive for you, and don't overstimulate. Like I said, dopamine or epinephrine or anything like that. If you overstimulate too much, the chances are you're going to be wired. You're going to be tired. You're not going to be able to retain. Your reaction time is going to be down. So, again, minimize the phone or any stimulation as much as you possibly can. Further from that, ensure that all the foods that you're consuming are non-inflammatory, that you're not having sugar, you're not having refined vegetable oils, you're getting your healthy fats, you're hydrating properly. And when I say hydrating, I don't just mean your tea or your chai tea or your coffee, but actual water and electrolytes. Make sure that you're getting good magnesium and getting your healthy fats like your omega-3s, of course, in balance with your omega-6, but focusing on your EPAs and DHAs because your brain soaks in fat and cholesterol. So you need to ensure that you have that for your cognitive function. Your sleep is going to be very, very important. No, not overstimulating, like I said. So you're cutting out your phone a good hour before bed. Maybe you're wearing your blue light blocking glasses. And then further from that, if you are going to look to some sort of nootropic, always say, look at your brain protective compounds first, so maybe your creatine. As we know, creatine helps with the ATP, and then anything that's going to feed your mitochondria. So the mitochondria, a lot of us do not form or function correctly. Maybe we've come down from a sickness, and it's usually because of mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, we have a lot of mitochondria in the brain. So we know that there's certain things like people talk about methylene blue, hydrogen, leuco blue, all good for your brain. So if you are optimized, then maybe you can kind of look at these nootropics that actually help as a brain protective compound before anything else. So, in the morning, I like to have my hydrogen tablets in the water. I have my creatine, which is a creatine with guanidinoacidic acid. I'll have a little bit of leuco blue in there, and I feel great, but I'm not going to feel great if my brain isn't hydrated. So I need to make sure that I am always drinking throughout the day as much as I possibly can, doing everything that I can to optimize my testosterone levels. So I'm making sure that I'm getting my sleep. I'm not overstimulating myself with light. I'm managing my stress. I'm getting good food and hydration into my body. And I'm not using any endocrine disruptors like on my skin or on my hair. Everything like a skincare or hair care or any hygiene care is all natural, no phthalates, no talc or endocrine disruptors or anything like that, because that can lower your testosterone. And we need testosterone to stay focused and stay on point as well. So those are some of the things that I'd suggest.
And coming on testosterone, a lot of Indians also don't have optimal levels of testosterone. I think the baseline, when you look at it on a report, is also shifted towards the left. So what can one do to absolutely do it in a way which is sustainable, and maybe in a way that most people can just adhere to it?
Okay, well, the first thing, like I said, is always going to be the sleep. If you're not sleeping, I don't care what testosterone precursors you take, your testosterone level's not going to go up. So sleep is going to be the number one. Number two is going to be the food. Are you getting adequate fats? Are you eliminating sugars? A lot of the starch carbs or bleached carbs, because in India, people generally overeat on carbohydrates, don't get enough protein or healthy fats. Ghee, of course, is a healthier fat, but there's a lot of people cooking in refined vegetable oils or, rancid oils. So those are going to be a couple of things. And then, I always look at everything that I'm cooking in, making sure if I'm using frying pans and I'm using oils, I'm not cooking in Teflon. So I'm going to use like ceramic pans, something that's not going to leach into my food. And much like leaching, I'll try to stay away from plastics, because water over in India isn't generally good to consume. People are drinking from plastic bottles all the time. A lot of those plastic bottles have been stored in heat or hot environments. So again, a lot of these microplastics going into the system or into the bottle, and now you're drinking it. These are endocrine disruptors. So try to stay away from them as much as possible. Try to eat out of like glass Tupperware containers or tiffins or metal tiffins. And then the same thing, try to drink out of a metal shaker wherever possible. No plastics. those are going to be the main sort of things. And as I mentioned earlier, any endocrine disruptors, a lot of people are putting creams on their body. They're soaking or washing with soaps that have endocrine disruptors. Try to always go for natural versions whenever possible, just to ensure that nothing is leaching into your system. And lastly, don't have your device in your phone. In your pocket. Don't have your phone in your pockets, close to, your crown jewels, as it were, because I feel that can obviously have a negative effect as well on fertility and your testosterone levels. So especially when I travel and I know that, or I'm in India, I know I'm getting exposed to so much more EMF and Wi-Fi than I usually would. I'm always wearing boxer shorts, or I have clothes that are made of Faraday. So that could be, I don't know, Lila Q or Get Lambs. These are different brands. So I always make sure that I'm, protecting myself in that regards. And I'm always wearing those Bahi trainers that I mentioned before. So I'm always earth and I'm connected to the earth, because you don't have that opportunity too much like in Delhi. You're not going to go and find a grassy patch and ground or earth, especially if I'm really, really busy. So I need to have that connection the entire time. And I'm 51 years old now, and my testosterone levels I've been able to optimize. Will I go to HRT in the future? Yeah, possibly. I'm not going to discount that, but if I can do whatever I can, I will. The other things that I'll do is take testosterone precursors. So I'll have DHEA, I'll have creatine, as I mentioned before. Creatine with guanidinoacetic acid gets absorbed into the system so much more efficiently, crosses the blood-brain barrier more efficiently as well. I'll go higher dose vitamin D, especially in times where, let's say, I'm in Delhi, there's a lot of smog there, or during the winter in Boise, Idaho, where I am, I'm not going to get as much sun. So I'm going to increase my vitamin D during that time as well, and maybe take progesterone as another precursor. So all these things generally have a positive effect.
Progesterone, you said, which is the female sex hormone, is that? Okay. So that helps with testosterone production. Is that something that somebody can get over a drugstore or a supplement store?
Yeah, you can get it from a supplement store. So you can get pregnenolone and you can get progesterone. So you can get both in a supplement store. You can get it from Amazon. So there's a company called Biomatrix, I think it is. Biomatrix. Yes, comes in a dropper. So I'll usually put all of that sort of stuff in a liquid in the morning. So I'll have my water. Like I said, I'll have my hydrogen in there. I'll do the droppers of vitamin D, the DHEA, progesterone. What else goes in there? I have a little bit of licorice in there as well. Doesn't taste the best, but I don't like to take too many pills and tablets. And there's a product that my brand does. I don't like to plug my brand, but I guess I am now. That's called Longevity Test. And that has a lot of Indian, it's got this, ashwagandha in there, KSM 66 from Hyderabad, Shilajit in there. So there's a lot of testosterone precursors in there too.
Right. But before all of that, you should get your sleep in place.
Supplements come last.
Right.
Yeah, the supplements won't work if you're not sleeping, if you're stressed. Don't think anything is going to work unless you're optimized. We know peptides are just huge at the moment, but the majority of people that come to me saying, hey, I want a peptide for this, can you give me guidance, blah, blah, blah. They're not optimized. They're not hormonally optimized. So some people could take, say, a growth hormone secretagogue, for instance, like an AOD 4694. They could take that and go, hey, my friend is on this and they burnt all this body fat, but I've taken it and I'm not. They're not hormonally optimized. So it's not going to work. If your cortisol levels are already high, your prolactin levels are going to high, how do you expect this secretagogue to work? It's probably going to throw up your insulin levels even higher. So now you're going to be more resistant. So you're not going to burn fat. So it's actually going to go the opposite direction. So you've got to optimize yourself first before you even look at medication, peptides, or supplements.
And what about exercise? Like, does that play a role in terms of your, let's say, cognitive performance, like we spoke about, and testosterone? Of course, testosterone, yes. So, what?
Yeah, good question. I completely missed those two out. I definitely should have. Yeah, so exercise for sure. Looking at your heavier compound movements, you shouldn't be in the gym really any more than an hour. So it should be intense. looking at your basic movements first, whether it be your leg press, squat, deadlift, bench press, etc. Those can obviously enhance your testosterone levels as well. And the other thing I totally forgot to mention is cold therapy. Cold therapy, whether it be ice baths, cryo, cold showers. There's cryo showers now as well. A company out of the UK sells. So I have a lot of clients in India use this thing called the cryo shower because the water just doesn't get hot enough. And a lot of people live in apartments. They don't have room for an ice bath. So that has been shown to help raise testosterone levels as well on a consistent basis. So, those two, but yeah, definitely exercise, not overdoing it. A lot of people I found in India, when they come to me, they say, yeah, I'm training 6 or 7 days a week. Generally, that can be overtraining. So maybe I'll get them on to 4 to 5 times a week, possibly. And whenever possible, whenever you can, when you're doing your cardio, for instance, get out in nature, or get out in the park or get outside. Don't just be confined to artificial harsh lighting all day because you're in the office. Now you're doing your workout. Now you're doing your cardio all indoors and you're not getting exposure to sunlight. So try to do so as much as possible. Otherwise, you're going to have to rely on your biohack again and use red light therapy. So I've got a red light machine because it does get, winter here is pretty harsh. I'm not going to get the sun exposure. So I'll, have red light exposure for a good 15 minutes in the morning. And that will actually help optimize testosterone levels too. Not as much as ice baths, but it will.
Right. I do the red light. It throws my HRV right up. Like that's the most effective way to boost my own HRV. And I've seen it on a couple of people. I'm yet to do some research on it, but anecdotally speaking, strictly, if I get that in with my sleep, my recovery is just golden. At least.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I have the, probably much like you, I have the bed or the panels here at home. But when I travel, that's the one thing that goes in my suitcase is my red light panel. I've got like a travel size one. It's called a Lumaflex. So I'll pack that. It's very easy. Of course, I could strap it to body parts if I've got any inflammation or anything that needs more collagen or elastin production, but I'll use it for my face. I'll use it for circadian rhythm, and I'll use it exactly for those purposes when I'm traveling. Of course, it's not going to be as powerful as when I'm at home, but I think it's that essential that it needs to come with me, because I'm going to be usually traveling to a different time zone as well. So I'll use that exposure as soon as I'm waking up or going to bed in that time zone. And it really, really helps with any jet lag.
Right. Absolutely. So that's in terms of cognitive performance. You've got testosterone. What would you say would be like 3 most important things for longevity, and what should one look out for, especially maybe for the Indian population, because I would say we're not really the best when it comes to having extended lifespans.
Yeah, so especially in India, as we mentioned, sleep is going to be the one for longevity. And when it comes to the food, increase in protein. A lot of people I've noticed over there just don't consume as much protein, and they overconsume their carbohydrates, especially with sugars. Generally, they'll eat their meal, which is, and again, I'm generalizing, which is overdone in carbohydrates, but then finishing with some type of sweets. That seems to be the norm. And one of the reasons why I think this is possibly the norm, of course, there's a lot of blood sugar irregularity, but a lot of the food is consumed when they're distracted. So they're not slowing down. They're not present when they consume their foods. And I always tell people, don't be on your phone. Don't be, on your computer. You need to be in a rest and digest state. Otherwise, you're not going to digest it. And once you've consumed that meal, because you've been in a sympathetic dominant state, you're usually like, well, what else can I eat? And usually that's something sweet or something that's nurturing, something that makes you feel good, in the short term, and it satisfies you. And you're much like if you're working out and you're hitting repetitions, but you're having a conversation with someone, you're not going to get that mind-muscle connection to optimize the enhancement of that muscle. It's the same thing with digesting your food. There's a great book called The Slow Down Diet, which talks about the science associated with that, and people who are present with their meals and putting their fork down between bites, they're heightened to their senses, smell, taste, texture, being grateful, knowing that there's people outside on the street begging for food, not knowing where their next meal is coming from. But you should be very, very grateful that, number one, you've got a meal in front of you, even if it is like boring, bland, and healthy. You should be very, very grateful that you've got that. And the chances are, once you've consumed that meal, let's say it's over a 20-minute period, you've already had the signal that lights up the bliss points in your brain to say, okay, I'm satisfied now, and I'm going to absorb up to 20% more micronutrients and macronutrients from that food, because you slow down and you were present when you were consuming it. So, being in that rest and digest state as much as you possibly can, leave your cortisol spiking for your workout, for your exercise, and that's it. And the other thing is, like you said, exercise. Exercise, especially if you think of your grip strength, squat strength, bone density, for instance. They've studied blue zones where people, for instance, in Okinawa, that are centenarians over 100 years old, they'll stand and sit from the floor on average about 40 times a day. That's their resistance training. They have perfect bone density. Where in the westernized culture or in India, we'll find that people don't have that bone density, and they'll lose their balance at maybe the age of 80, and then a couple of years later, they've passed away. So we've got to ensure that we are working with our balance and with resistance training to ensure that we do not decrease our bone density or our muscle density either, because we need that metabolic flexibility from when we're consuming foods as well.
That is so true. And, at Odds, we are working very hard to educate people on these things, right? And of course, you've got the grind culture already set in, and people are like, we want to live right now in the moment. I was speaking the other day to a friend, and he said, the present is so tough on so many people. How can you even possibly get a perspective into the future and think so far in the future? Well, I'm like, it's absolutely true that you have suffering, but then you got to choose your suffering, whether it comes now or later. And I don't really see anybody suffering as much. Imagine if you were 200 years ago, nobody had the kind of facilities you have right now. You've got refrigerators, ready markets, ready food. You should be grateful for all of that. You're not hunting and gathering for food and stuff like that. So I don't know what your worries are about, but there's a way to look at life, and I think you should try and lead the best life possible.
Yeah, well, we always want more, right? We're never satisfied with what we've got. I did a 10-day Vipassana a couple of years ago. And, I remember we were we're staying out in nature, and during a 10-day Vipassana, for your listeners that don't know, it's basically 10 days of silence. There's no eye contact. You're not reading anything. You certainly can't take in a phone or book or write anything. It's basically meditation from like 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. You have three breaks, 2 15-minute breaks, I think, and 1 hour break. And I remember we were shown there's a little walking path. And I was like, oh my God, is that all we've got? It's tiny. It's a tiny walking path. But then by day 5, I think I remember thinking to myself, this is more than enough. This is plenty. But we're always wanting more. You look at, say, a movie of maybe 20 years ago that you really enjoyed when it came out, and now you look at the CGI or the what it looked like, it's like, that is terrible.
Yeah.
That would never stimulate us now, but it stimulated us then, and we're always after that stimulation. So when I drove to this Vipassana, it was like a 5-hour drive. I wasn't looking at the shape of the clouds or the mountainside or how beautiful it was on the way there. On the way back, I noticed all of that. My senses were heightened. I could hear the wind. I could see the shape, and the shapes and structures in front of me. And I was so much more appreciative of what was there, and I could just be, as opposed to looking for that stimulation and wanting more, which our society is basically molded us to want. The grass is never greener. The Wi-Fi is always too slow. It's just the stupidest things, right? When we have to sit down, and life is going to pass us by. And I don't know if you've ever been to like an old people's home, but there's a lot of regret there because they focused on success, their money, their social stature, as opposed to focusing on adventure, being in the now, and happiness. So we can become very, very warped as we become influenced by society. And that's why I'll always try to term that culture and repeat it, is that you have to control your environment and not get controlled by it.
So how would you balance that? Because there's a lot of people they'd be like, okay, you know what, if I don't have a purpose and something that drives me, then I lose the sense of, why do I exist? And then in Buddhism, you have the suffering of existence, so to speak. Leo Tolstoy had it towards the end of his life. And how do you at the same time have perspective that, this is a journey? And the reason why I ask this is because I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you're way more experienced than me in this. I believe that you need to balance both, because if you just only end up, living a life of simplicity without purpose, that can lead to sometimes boredom, depression, and questions like why and all of that, and what do I do next? And if you just go one side and just chase that dream of yours and overdo it, then of course, you know what happens with that. Nothing good comes out.
Yeah, well, you just answered it. It's balance. Like when I went and did that Vipassana, I didn't stay there after the 10 days and say, hey, I'm going to work here. I'm going to become a monk. I needed to come back to the real world, but it gave me the initiation and the education needed to say, okay, I'm overdoing it. I'm doing too much. I'm running 5 businesses. I'm traveling so much. I'm taking like 100 flights a year sometimes. I have to bring this down a little bit. So then I started doing the digital detoxes. So that digital detox is, okay, no one's going to be able to reach me like on a Sunday. I'm definitely going to bookend my day without the devices or being able to be reachable for a good hour after waking, a good couple of hours before bed, where I'm going to go out, I'm going to walk my dog, I'm going to spend some time maybe reading, maybe in front of the TV, whatever, doing whatever I want, as opposed to what I'm committed to. Now, I'm not going to go the other way and do absolutely nothing. We see people that retire, they work really hard all their lives. At the age of 65, they retire, and a year later, they're dead because they've lost their sense of purpose. And it's like the universe says, hey, well, you're not doing anything now, and you're not reproducing. The universe doesn't need you anymore. Off you go. That's kind of what it's like. And I feel that we always have to have that sense of drive or purpose. But as you said, we have to balance it. We can't go, and try to accomplish everything in a day, but we can't do nothing in a day. But you can have these mini breaks, these mini detoxes. It works for some people, not for others. Like a friend of mine, Dr. Dome, he's like the world's leading biodentist, would be a great guest for you, by the way, from Germany. Every 5 to 6 weeks, he goes away on a holiday for about a week with him and his family and kids. He just come back from Qatar. He does that. That works for him. For me, I like to have my mini breaks, like during the week, if possible. On the weekend, try to take a day off. Sometimes I'm traveling, it doesn't happen. Okay, maybe I'm not going to be able to take a weekend off for a good 3 or 4 weeks. But I always try to focus on getting that time off. But I always get that time off during the week for a good couple of hours or hour in the morning and in the evening where no one can reach me. And I think that gives me the sense of balance. It helps put me into that parasympathetic dominant state, and I'm so much better to be around, and I'm more productive. I get more done. So you have to be selfish in order to be selfless. If you can be selfish for a couple of hours a day, you're going to be able to give more of yourself and be more productive.
That is so true. I'm trying that. I wish somebody was there to give me this advice much earlier, because I went into overdrive. My psoriasis sort of went over.
Right. Got it. Yeah, I had the same thing with asthma.
Right.
So I had really bad asthma for my entire life. And then when I was able to slow things down, of course, I did some things. I got rid of conventional dairy out of my diet and, a lot of glyphosate and antibiotics from food. And I don't have that issue anymore. But I think, when your body is just so stressed, it is not recovering. It's not healing. It can barely heal from your workout. So how is it going to heal your immune system? It probably isn't. Your gut is obviously where a lot of your hormones in your immune system is housed. And if you're overly stressed, or maybe you're stressing it as well from foods on top of that, you're never going to heal that psoriasis or whatever it may be. You have to put your body and your central nervous system first.
100%. On a different note, because you're probably one of the most successful trainers out there. who's coached, I think, almost every kind of individual possible. You must have come across some snobbish people as well, somebody who's trying to, maybe get things in control. Like you said, the clients can get suggestive about the kind of workouts they want to do or the kind of lifestyles they want to lead. What sort of a message could a trainer take away from this conversation in terms of how to earn respect, how to build a livelihood, how to truly be good at this, so that whatever it is that they seek in terms of self-efficacy, knowing and acknowledging that yes, I am a trainer and it is a noble profession, I'm trying to impact lives here, and be okay with it. So how can someone start, and how should they perceive this profession, so to speak?
Okay, very good questions here. So a couple of things come to mind. It's you have to be your own shop window front. A client is not going to take the trainer serious if they look 10 times better than the trainer. The trainer has to take care of themselves first and live the life that they're trying to pass on to someone else. So be your own shop window front. Communication is going to be very, very key with those types of clients. So I will always ask lots of questions. If a client has all the answers, now I'm going to ask him questions because I know there's a lot there that they can't answer. So for instance, and I'll use analogies. So there's two Indian international pilots that I have as clients, okay? And I would ask them when they say, no, well, I think I should do this or I should do that. Luckily, I'm in a position where I can say, look, if I don't want to train you anymore, I won't train you and I'll pass you on to this trainer. I can do that, but not everybody can, especially when they're beginning. So for instance, in this scenario, I will ask that pilot, hey, let me ask you, if you designed a plane yourself and you put it together, would you fly it? And they'll say no. They're not a precision engineer. They don't know what they're doing. They know how to fly this thing, but they're not going to risk their lives. But you will leave it in the hands of the experts to tell you the right things and to give you the guidance and give you that sense of security, correct? Yes. That's exactly what I am. As a trainer, I've spent my life, or my last 20 years or 30 years or whatever it is, homing this precision specifically for you. So you have to put your faith into what I'm trying to tell you, because I'm a professional at the end of the day. And that's kind of how you need to speak to a lot of these clients for them to get that aha moment. And I do use quantification to my advantage as well. So I try to get my trainers to always use the quantification of, maybe let's look at your blood markers. So learn how to translate these blood markers to your clients and get them to do a biological age test, because the chances are they may not want to listen to you in the beginning, but if they have all this data to go, oh my God, I am 15, 20 years older than my chronological age, tell me what to do. I'll do whatever you tell me because I don't want to die. Much like if people have kids, that's another form of accountability that you can use against them, or to help them, I should say, where you say, well, do you want to be there with your kids and seek adventure and run around with them, at the same age as what you are now? So when they're in their 30s, that you in your 60s is still, kind of like their friend and able to kind of keep up with them? Of course they do. So there's certain ways that you can, you can speak to your clients, and quantification and technology you can use to keep them accountable. Maybe get them to be a part of a group, because in a group dynamic, that crowd source of inspiration can be the accountability that they need as well.
Right, absolutely. Another question just popped in my mind, because clients go like, I saw an expert on Instagram, this is what that person said, and we should be doing it this way. You got all the other trainers in Bollywood who are not exactly the specialists, so to speak. They're doing weird exercises. A couple of days back, I saw Kareena Kapoor doing a reverse a dead mill while holding the bottom of a treadmill. I don't know, it looked just funny. Or somebody doing some windshield wipers on windows, and then clients go like, there's this a trainer, he's training this celebrity, I want to do this exercise. And you got young kids, who've done their A certification, they've done their CSCS from the NSCA. They're all excited with the knowledge that they've gotten from a textbook, and then all wiped out by some gimmick on the internet. And they go like, okay, you know what, I don't know what to say. And they're younger and they're older. So how does one navigate that?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And they just have to have faith in you at the end of the day, because it is just people just being way too distracted. And I had this with a very famous client in Pakistan just recently. And he's just sending me all these posts all the time. I'm like, stop it. I don't even look at this stuff, because I kind of post and ghost. I don't have time to see what other people are doing. But you just have to have faith in the process, because everyone becomes an expert, including the client, especially if they're in a calorie deficit. They start to second guess themselves. They start to second guess you. They just got to have faith in the process and see it through. And we always look at success because we know that sacrifice is so much harder. So if we see someone doing a 500-pound deadlift, we see the success. We don't know the sacrifice that went into maybe years to work up to that 500-pound deadlift. But because it's on Instagram, it's that instant gratification of the success that we focus on. And I'll always tell clients, okay, so you want to attain these goals, the sacrifices, right? This is going to be difficult. I'm going to be a hard ass. You're going to hate me during this process, maybe. But as long as you're focused and you have faith in the tasks that you need to make sacrifices every single day in order to achieve the success, hey, we'll be able to make a go of this. But you can't be distracted, because everyone will become an expert along this journey. And, I don't mind answering these questions and telling you why this may not work for you, but you shouldn't just take it as gospel, because otherwise this road that we've got is a straight line, becomes very meandering, and it's going to take you a lot longer for you to achieve that goal.
Right. One last quick question, because I think it's been an hour. I don't want you walking all day on this treadmill. Right.
I've done 2.5 miles. We're good.
Okay. So what would you quantify for a general population individual? Like, what would be the few things that you quantify? There's a lot of quantification we do at Odds. We've got this beautiful dashboard which aggregates everything into two aspects. One would be a metabolic age, one would be a mechanical age. If somebody were to just, look at, 5 things I want to quantify to optimize my health, and more or less, if I'm working towards that, I'll be in good shape, I will be in great health, and I'm good to go. So what would those things be?
Sure. Okay. So sleep is going to be one.
Yeah.
VO2 max is going to be another. Blood reports would be another. You mentioned your metabolic, biological, mechanical age. That would be another. And DNA. I like to go by DNA as well to see what could be the correlation there. Like, usually if it's a good DNA test, that it will cross-pollinate with the blood report very, very accurately. But if they can't have the access to the DNA, I'd say HRV.
Understood. Oh, that's great.
Blood glucose has to be in there too.
Yeah, of course. That goes in the blood reports. And what specifically would you look at when you're looking at blood?
So it's all dependent on that person, of course, and what they're trying to achieve. But, I want to look at their H1C. I want to look at their creatinine levels, how their liver is functioning. I like to look at their vitamin D levels as well, and testosterone.
Right. So that sort of sums it up.
Hormones, yeah.
Hormone, yeah. So for a woman, it would be the other hormones, of course, testosterone as well, because,
Yeah, estradiol, all that stuff, yeah.
Right. Understood. And it was quite insightful speaking to you. I was just thinking after this, these are the things I'm going to do. And I just thought that, since I'm 35, so I should be learning all these, I have this great way to just, learn from others and sort of navigate my life according to best practices. So a lot of thought for me as well, do I just like go into overdrive every single time? Like Kris is telling me, no, you do your mindfulness, be in parasympathetic state, you'll just buy more time and do more things.
Yeah, and I always tell people, look, you've got to create your own book at the end of the day. So I've listened to a lot of experts over the years. I'll have them on my podcast. I read their books. I interact with them when I go to events. But not everything that they say is going to be applicable to me or I'm going to relate to. But maybe out of, say, that one book within the conversation that I've spoken to him about, I'm going to take a page or a chapter from it, and I'm going to put that together for my own pages or chapters in my life. So I always say, you collect from all these experts and go, okay, that is going to be beneficial. That's going to be beneficial. I'll throw away the rest of the pages, and here's my book. And then maybe I'll come out with a new edition next year.
Right. No, absolutely. It was great talking to you, Kris. Please let me know whenever you're here in Delhi. I would.
Will do. Yeah, I'll be there next year. So we are opening a new gym there I think it's like within the 4th or 5th month of next year. So I'll definitely be over there then. I'll give you a holler.
Yeah, and we'll catch up for breakfast, not dinner.
Breakfast. You got it. Unless it's an early dinner. You got it.
Yeah, absolutely. And no vegetable oils. I'll make sure.
No vegetables. No vegetable oils at all, buddy.
Super. See you soon, Kris.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
It was great having you. Bye.
It was great being on. Bye-bye. Thanks.